Happy Monday, sophomores. Hope you all had a great weekend. Welcome to your final week of lessons. This is week 10, lesson 44. Let's get started. But first, the joke of the day, as always. What did the football coach say to the broken vending machine? Give me my quarterback. So as I said a second ago, we are on day 1 of week 10 lessons. The video you should be watching right now is called ELA G10 W10 L44. The text we're going to be reading this week is called A Time Capsule Long Forgotten That the Space Needle is Found. And today you will engage in the first read and write a response to the text. When you get down to lesson 44, make sure you read the material section so you can know everything that you need for today. No surprise here, but the learning target for today is I can complete first read annotations to help with comprehension and future analysis of the text. This is actually the last first read lesson you all will engage in before summer break. Let's quickly talk through the read, think, talk, write protocol for today. For the read section, some background information first. A time capsule is a stored collection of goods or information usually intended as an intentional communication with future people or even your future self. Read the text, A Time Capsule Long Forgotten That the Space Needle is Found, and perform the steps of the first read routine, which is the notice, annotate, connect, and respond. For the think section today, you're going to think about the following questions. What do you know about time capsules? What do you think is the point of creating and hiding a collection of items or literature for years? So you're going to familiarize yourself with what a time capsule is by reading the text. And then you're going to decide, in your opinion, what is the point of creating and hiding a collection of items or literature for years? What's the point of actually making a time capsule and burying it? And as always, make sure you go down to the next page. It's actually after the note catcher for you to get the first read guide. For the talk section, you're going to talk with someone about the following questions. What time period would you be most interested in seeing a time capsule from? What do you think a time capsule from 2004, close to your birth year, might contain? So you really got to think about what time period you'd be most interested in seeing a time capsule from. Like if you could have your pick at finding a time capsule tomorrow, what time period would you want it from? And then what do you think a time capsule from like around the time you were born might contain? For the writing section, your task is to think about this unit's essential question. What do our possessions say about us? On your note catcher, you're going to write about the contents of the time capsule left at the Space Needle. How do they reflect what was important to those who created it back in 1982? And when you read the text, it'll make sense, but you're really just supposed to capture down all of the items that were inside the time capsule. And then how do you think these items reflect what was important to those who put those items in there back in 1982? And when you get to the note catcher, you'll see that there is a space for you to write your answers to all of these questions. As always, for today's closing, you're going to share your writing with someone, and then you're going to read a book for at least 20 minutes and document your reading on the reading log. So the model today will not be around the first read routine, it'll be around the writing section. So just a quick reminder about the writing section so we can all be on the same page of what you have to do. For the writing section, you have to think about this unit's essential question. What do our possessions say about us? And then you have to write about the contents of the time capsule left at the Space Needle. And then you have to figure out how do those items reflect what was important to those who created it back in 1982. So on page 158 and page 159 is when they first reveal like all of the items that are inside the time capsule. So what you should do right now is stop the video and complete the first read of the text as well as the think and talk parts of the lesson. And then once you're done with all 3 of those sections of the protocol, then press play. When you're ready to engage in the write section, you can engage in the model with me, and then you'll be able to actually complete the writing section on your own. Okay, so we're going to start with the writing section by rereading page 158, which is the first of the 2 pages that list out the items of the time capsule. And after we come across some items that were listed, I'm going to write in the margins some information about like what I think this says about the people that put those items in there and what was important to them back in 1982 when they first put the time capsule together. Let's get started with reading. There were letters, photographs, and postcards from 1982. Some mementos dated all the way to 1962, the year the Space Needle opened and Seattle hosted the World's Fair. Mr. Kaufman pulled out a master key that he said opened every lock in the Space Needle in 1982. He pointed to a black and white photograph of 3 women in shiny dresses, elevator operators from 1962. There was an old menu for the restaurant, top of the needle, offering crayfish bisque and scallops primavera. There was an old reel of audio tape, and on it, a recording of a 1982 broadcast commemorating the 20th anniversary of the World's Fair. Okay, so these items were important to Mr. Kaufman because they showed what the Space Needle was like in 1962. While there were similarities, there were differences to how it was in 2002 when they first discovered the time capsule. So the fact that he included a key from back in the day that opened up every lock in the Space Needle in 1982 was interesting, because even though I talked about 1962, like even from 1962 to 1982, I'm sure the place changed a lot, and that key could show you like what the locks were like back then and what their security measures were. The black and white photograph of 3 women in shiny dresses, the elevator operators from 1962. That's interesting because it was, first of all, it's a black and white photograph, which is very uncommon nowadays. And I'm not sure if they still have elevator operators. I'm sure they do, but I doubt they wear like shiny dresses like they used to. So that like sort of spoke to how the Space Needle used to be back in 1962. And then I bet the restaurant is still there. There's some restaurant that's still there, but the menu is really important because it spoke to like what they served at the time, what was sort of like a popular food at the time. And so that was interesting. And then the reel of the audio tape from the 1982 broadcast, which commemorated the 20th anniversary of the World's Fair. I bet they learned a lot about like the Space Needle and what was happening at the time when they listened to that broadcast. I mean, they're probably hearing a lot of different reflections about the World's Fair and the 20th anniversary of it. So the audio recording is probably a good way to hold on to the past of the Space Needle. Let's keep going. In a phone interview, Mr. Kaufman said he was excited not only about those items, but also about the capsule itself. On the outside was a sketch of the tower by John Graham, the architect who designed the Space Needle. And Mr. Kaufman's own wife, whom he met on the elevator at the Space Needle, had written in careful calligraphy on the top, "Time capsule to be opened April 21st, 2002. So the time capsule itself was important to Mr. Kaufman because it showed how the Space Needle looked in 1962. It was also important to him because his wife, who he met at the Space Needle, wrote the note on the outside of the capsule. So again, like the items were important because he could sort of see what the Space Needle, which he loved, was like in 1962. Not only just from the items inside the Space Needle, but also the sketch that was on the outside of the capsule. And also, like, he had a personal connection because he had his wife do the calligraphy where she wrote, like, open please in April 21st, 2002. And so clearly he had a personal connection to not only the time capsule, but the Space Needle, because he met his wife at the Space Needle. So these contents were like really important to him because they reflected on like what the Space Needle used to be back in 1962 and 1982, but also it reminded him of his personal connection to the Space Needle, where he met his wife and probably still with her today, maybe. Let's keep reading. People are like, well, why was there a 15-year lag? Said David Mandapat, the Space Needle's public relations director, and it's because I don't think anyone knew about it. Mr. Mandapat, who has worked at the Space Needle for 21 years, had heard that a capsule existed at the Space Needle, but he didn't know where. Ahead of this year's renovation project, he spoke with people like Bob Witter, who was a duty manager at the Space Needle in 1982. But Mr. Mandapat could never pinpoint the exact location of the capsule and thought that perhaps it had been lost in some renovation project. These paragraphs do not discuss the items in the capsule, so nothing to reflect on, but they do just talk about like why there's a 15-year lag. People knew that there was a time capsule hidden somewhere, but they just didn't know where, and they forgot about it. So even though it was supposed to be open in 2002, there was a lag. It wasn't opened when it was supposed to be open because the people that were working there when the time capsule was first put into place weren't working there anymore, and then just people forgot about it. So that's what happens with time capsules sometimes. And we're going to talk later on in the week about how if you were creating your own time capsule, like how would you make sure that it was found by people? Okay, just a few more paragraphs on page 159. He was happy the capsule was unveiled Friday morning, but perhaps not as much as Mr. Witter, who loves the Space Needle so much he got married in it. Wow. Mr. Witter was even there as a child at the 1962 World's Fair, and one of his contributions to the capsule was a photograph from that event. Another was paint chips. In 1982, he climbed to the roof of the tower to dig out some flakes of the orange hue that had topped the tower decades earlier. Thankfully, this renovation project happened, Mr. Witter said, because had this not happened, the mystery would have gone on and on and on. Okay, so Mr. Witter found value in the items there too. Here's what I put. Mr. Witter included in the time capsule a photograph of him as a child at the 1962 World's Fair, as well as paint chips he collected from the roof of the tower in 1982. Not only were these items important to Mr. Witter because they showed how the building looked in 1962 and 1982, but they also were important because they helped him reminisce on his childhood. We can infer that when he speaks about the mystery that would have gone on and on and on, he is not only speaking about the mystery of how the Space Needle was in 1962 and 1982, but also about the mystery of his childhood and all of the unanswered questions he may have had. So this was also personal for Mr. Witter too. He contributed some antique items, the photograph of the 1962 World's Fair, as well as paint chips he collected in 1982, right before the time capsule was hidden. But he also, felt like this was something that was a part of his childhood. And if he wouldn't have discovered this time capsule, he may have forgotten some of those memories about his childhood, which I think was really, really, really important to him. So there was a lot of mysterious elements surrounding this time capsule, but also just the Space Needle in general, because as time passes, people tend to forget memories. That's just a sad reality. And so for the people that put things in the time capsule, this was valuable to them because they got to remember how the Space Needle was, which was important to them. They also got to connect with a part of their past and memories of the past, which I'm sure was priceless to them. Hopefully that was helpful to you before you actually complete your writing section today. Tomorrow's lesson will be lesson 45, and the learning target is I can complete close read annotations to analyze connections between the events documented in the text and the individual's motivations. So as you know, the second lesson of every week is always a close read lesson, but tomorrow's lesson will specifically focus on events in the text and a connection between the individual's motivations. Thank you for being amazing students and learning with me today. Just a few reminders that you're probably sick of me saying. Number one, don't forget to talk about your lesson with someone when you're done. Number two, read for 20 minutes and complete a reading log entry. The reading log is at the front of your packet. And number three, practice reading fluency using the first or second page of your weekly reading. And that is also at the front of your packet too if you need a reminder of what reading fluency is. As always, you can email your teacher for support. I hope you have a great rest of your day. And remember, keep learning.